another encore, so I don't need to introduce. Andreas Cser is doing another super, super exciting session about global tech trends and the new rules of raising venture capital. Please welcome Andreas again. Thank you so much. All right.
And with that, I have the privilege of welcoming a real life, in the flesh, venture capitalist from Silicon Valley. Please give it up to Cser Kunst.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah. So, how is Silicon Valley these days? How do early stage companies do in Silicon Valley?
Oh, what a great question. I think that Silicon Valley is two things. How many of you guys have actually been to Silicon Valley? Okay, so basically, picture the busiest highway you could ever drive down with some of like the most relatively depressing, although like nice office buildings, and this is all Silicon Valley is. Like the land of milk and honey is just an office park down the 101 south of San Francisco in Northern California. And the important thing about Silicon Valley is that it is full of VCs who have cumulative assets under management to deploy that are in the hundreds of billions of dollars. That is very important when you're a startup. There is and has been a lot of magnetism and sort of special like coming together there of startups certainly. But for the last like 20 some years, it's more about startups moving there once they're formed rather than starting there. And we've driven the costs of housing and infrastructure and everything else so high there that now even a lot of the Silicon Valley investors are like, honestly, I would rather take my private jet to fly to your board meeting at half a country or continent away than have you here because it's so expensive to be here. All of this is to say that like Silicon Valley is a group of investors, it's an idea, and the actual startups there are often your peers who've picked up and moved over there and then realize that they might have better luck building out their engineering teams and everything in this part of the world. So what's on their minds there? I think it's money often. I think it's figuring out how to raise money, and not because you have a great idea with product market fit and you're really excited to go fund it, but because you have $500,000 in student loan debt and another, like you have to pay every employee $100,000 to $200,000 a year like minimum, so you just need an insane amount of money to run your company. And so then everybody ends up pivoting to like a agentic AI wrapper on top of Chat GPT that does your taxes for you. And so I wouldn't say there are moments in Silicon Valley where it feels like exciting and fresh and new. This is honestly not one of them in a lot of ways. It's a lot of people who are trying to figure out how to build companies that can get funded because they have bills to pay. So I am always bullish on innovation. I don't think right now that Silicon Valley feels like the center of the innovation universe.
So on that note, what does VCs help lose sleep at night, and what's the sort of thing that keeps you awake?
So for VCs, I know that you're like, being a VC is great. You just have loads of money to give to people and everybody wants money from you and your life is perfect. It's not the hardest job in the world. I've been a startup founder. It is a bajillion times harder to be a startup founder than it is to be a VC. That being said, you very much have a boss when you're a VC, and that is the people you've raised money from. Because if they don't think that you're making them enough money, they don't keep giving it to you. And because there haven't been a lot of IPOs, because venture has been slowing over the last few years in terms of exits and liquidity options, most VCs, I would say almost every VC, is mostly concerned about where they're going to be able to raise money from and where they're going to get liquidity from. So if nobody's IPOing, right, think of 5 absolutely massive unicorn companies right now globally, right? Revolut, OpenAI, whatever. they haven't returned money to their investors for the most part because they haven't gone public, they haven't sold. And with the president of my country currently trying to destabilize the entire world, it's unclear when those IPOs will happen. And so it's never a terrible time to be a VC. Like, this is considered a work trip for me, right? But it is a more stressful time to be a VC than many times because you're worried about how you're going to make money back for your investors.
Let's pivot for a moment. Tell us a bit about Sarah.
Yeah.
About how you've become a solo GP and in Silicon Valley, where it's extra hard even to become that, and also as part of a minority. So what kind of obstacles did you have to kind of overcome? And I'm looking at you, crowd, also coming from Central Eastern Europe, which is not the easiest part to kind of start in, and overcoming many obstacles. Yeah. So maybe there's some parallels that you can draw here.
Yeah. Well, I did not attend a top technical university, so you guys are all paces ahead of me. So I run Cleo Capital. I started it in 2018. Prior to that, I was an investor, startup operator, generally working on product and business roles, and then also startup founder. I had been a scout for Sequoia, the big venture fund. I had led Bumble, the dating app's corporate VC arm. I had done a lot of things kind of in and around venture before I started my fund. One interesting thing actually about a lot of limited partners, the investors who invest into VC funds, is they don't, if you're raising a small-ish fund, right? So you're not raising hundreds of millions of dollars for your funds, they actually think it's kind of good that you're a solo GP because they don't have to underwrite the relationship risk, right? It's not ideal for them to have 4 general partners in a fund, and much like a startup, all of a sudden they're all fighting and the company might be doing great, but now there's like this other huge problem, and what do you do? And so, it has long been thought that it's not great to be a solo GP. I can't speak to European LPs. I don't raise money from Europe. There's not a lot of money here to raise from, and it seems like from everything I've heard, it's a much bigger pain in the ass. So I raise from the US or the Middle East because they tend to be more sophisticated and bigger and faster check writers on the limited partner side. But they generally understand that it is perfectly okay to back one individual if that's who you like. And so I'd worked in and around tech for about a decade before I started my fund. And in terms of sort of the headwinds, right, I'm literally from an area of the US that sort of looks like this. It's just flatter. But we have like a lot of cornfields. My first 2 jobs were literally on a farm, like pulling weeds in a bean field and picking strawberries. And so, I came from a 300-person farming town in the middle of nowhere. I went to a perfectly very fun, but not super academically prestigious university in Michigan, the state that I'm from. And then I ended up in New York, and then I ended up in Silicon Valley. And there's no sort of obvious path for where I started and where I'm at now. And there's an even less obvious path when you're a woman or when you're Black, especially in America. And I never really thought about it because it's no one's fault where they're born or who they're born to, right? Like, none of us have any control over that. It might be the last and only thing we have no control over in our lives, especially people in this room who are incredibly smart and able to sort of end up wherever they want. And so that's just my lived experience. Do I know that racism and sexism and sometimes regionalism and classism and all these other weird things play a role in how I'm treated or things like that? Sure. But I've never focused on it that much because it's something I can't change. So I spend my time focused on what can I optimize, what can I change, what can I do? And no matter how much I stay out of the sun, I'm never going to look like you, right? So like that's a waste of time. And so for me, I've always focused on building, and my thing is this business, it's money, it's people. And so those are the things I've focused on. And I've ended up, I ran Bumble, the dating app, their corporate VC fund, literally because I had a friend, a girl who had like interviewed me once for some article, who then ended up working at Bumble, and I stayed in touch with her. So she invited me to a party that Bumble was throwing, and the CEO was there, and I was single at the time, and I race up to Whitney, the CEO, and I'm like, oh my God, I have so much feedback for you. She's like, okay, hi. And I was giving her literally product feedback, right? Here's things that I think you should be doing in your product, because I love QA. And that unsolicited product feedback, she's like, oh, you should come to this other thing. We should keep talking. And that keep talking, right? I'm just doing free work for this person, turned into her saying, you know, what else should we be doing at the company? And I was like, well, you should invest in women startups. You should invest in women-led startups. And she's like, okay, well, do you want to do it? We can do that off of our marketing sheet, but we need somebody to do it. I'm not going to hire somebody. Will you do it on the side? And I was like, absolutely. And so, you know, you can end up in the most unlikely of places by leaning into like what your skill set is and what you're good at and what you like doing, and sort of just doing it for a while before kind of looking at what's the immediate ROI, or kind of where your strength lies, I think, tends to be where you're going to outperform. And even in that, like, this isn't a judgment call, the demographics are very different here, but like, I think I'm the only Black woman here, right? Maybe there's like a couple other people I haven't seen yet. That means that even if you say after, who was that speaker? He was really good. He was like bald and like maybe kind of like German or like Eastern European. Like I'm like looking at two of them right now, right? If you say, who was that speaker, right? The Black woman, I think she's American. Oh, yeah, Sarah, right? You can literally, I don't know if this party trick works in Romania, but somebody tell me, you literally in the US can Google Black female VC and my face pops up in the Google search image results, right? So like, that's an advantage. Well, I mean, it's not necessarily good, right? We want more of them. We want more of them so that I'm not, you know, so I'm N of one. But like, that is a huge advantage. Am I excited and thrilled when there are other Black female VCs and this network can be bigger in places like the US where we're a significant part of spending power and population? Of course. But in the meantime, it means that while it might be easier for you to get hired into some roles, I'm going to be a lot easier to remember. And if I'm in a job where I can lean into sort of being remembered, being unique, you know, things like that, that's a huge advantage for me, in a way that being like, you know, like Natalia, my friend earlier, was saying about walking into a room and every like old white dude is wearing the same suit. Like, that's 90% of Europe, right? I don't see any other dudes with my little sandals on today. So I think leaning into your differences, leaning into your strengths, like I'll give you all a cheat code. One of my very dear friends, Kia, whose last name I can't pronounce because she is Bulgarian, was a reporter at Axios for a long time. Now she's at PitchBook. She covers venture capital. Nothing makes her more excited. She moved to the US when she was a child, but still spends a lot of time in Bulgaria. Nothing makes her more excited than when she's out and about at tech conferences anywhere around the world and runs into somebody who's like from her part of the world, right? Who's spent time in Sofia. So when you do that, when you see those like little things, right? Kia is going to be much more excited to cover one of your startups in PitchBook than she is, you know, Brad Smith from whatever, Stanford, because like there's a lot of those. And so you can't do anything about where you're from. There's also lots of reasons why I think you shouldn't. The cost of living here and the free education, it's all beautiful and amazing. But you can lean into your differences so that it kind of becomes a little bit of like your superpower.
Yeah, I think when I'm gonna tell my 17-year-old son about this chat, what will I tell him? I will just repeat it, summarize it maybe for everyone, because one thing I've experienced in Central Eastern Europe is that beside the small strata of people who are very, very entrepreneurial and very much outgoing, a large part of people are just kind of sitting there and waiting for things to happen. It's kind of maybe a kind of hangover from the old days where the state was kind of taking care of everything. And while that majority of people are hopefully not like that, I think that spirit is sometimes still there. And so the three things, and I see it in my son, even in London, the thing that I'm taking away is kind of to lean in, you know, to putting yourself out there and to kind of give forward. You know, especially the giving forward is a difficult one. But thank you for that, Sarah. I think we'll pivot back for a second to the VC to the VCing. What's your kind of best and worst deal? And did you know straight away that it was a bad deal straight after the wedding, or did it take a longer time to find out?
I think, and we were talking about this earlier, I don't really think that there's a worse deal in VC. Americans are wildly okay with risk, and sometimes that's bad. You could argue that what we're doing now geopolitically is like, could you maybe think about consequences, right? But like, if you're not the leader of the quote unquote free world, also quote unquote leader, like, it's actually pretty good. You can just do stuff and like you lose money, but who cares? Because my investors, the way that venture capital works, at least in the US, my investors expect that I will make them at least $3 for every $1 they invest in me, ideally closer to 10, but that I will do that off of maybe 5 deals in the entire portfolio of like 100 plus companies, right? That means that they expect the rest of those deals to go to functionally zero. And the fun thing about venture capital, as opposed to like hedge funds or something, there's no leverage. I can't go negative, right? It's not like, you can be underwater on like a house mortgage or something, right? You can't be underwater on a venture capital deal. That means if I invest $100,000 in your startup and you promptly set it on fire and like I never hear from you again, I'm out $100,000, but the next startup I invested on the day after yours might take that 100,000 and make me, $1 billion from it. So why do I care? Like, don't steal my money. I'm petty, but like, it doesn't matter. And so I don't really know what my worst deal is because it is a binary outcome. You either make me a lot of money or you don't. And the companies that make a lot of money could be the best companies. They could also have just gotten lucky in terms of where they're at in the cycle or who they got to acquire them or what the IPO markets were doing that week. It might be the founder that I personally hate the most. It might be the founder. It might be that they pivoted into the world's dumbest idea. But hey, like, I'm still making a lot of money, and vice versa, right? Companies that fail can have the smartest founders, the best idea, the hardest working, blah, 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 and you can just get unlucky. A huge amount of all of this is luck. You have to be smart, you have to have a good idea, but then you have to get really, really lucky. And this honestly is something, well, I'll tell you 2 things that sound opposite, maybe they are, I don't care, is that one, as my father likes to say, the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? So you tend to get lucky when you give yourself more opportunities to be lucky. And so you certainly have to show up and work hard. That's not something this part of the world tends to have a problem with. But then the flip side of it is that you also have to kind of believe you're lucky. My husband's floating around here somewhere, and he can tell you that anytime we gamble, I never have any idea what I'm doing, ever, because I just like don't care to learn, like poker, whatever, like anything. I just announce that I have lucky girl syndrome. I'm going to win so much. I have lucky girl syndrome. And the amount that I win, and like this man, he's back there somewhere, he has a PhD in physics, and he is a math genius, and he will lose to me at all of these casino games because I just sit there going, I'm really lucky. Did I win? Did I win? Because I'm really lucky. These are largely games of chance, not skill, but like his skill and actually understanding what we're playing should be an edge. I am convinced that my delusions, my absolute delusions and vibes are actually what gives me an edge. And so like, if you spend a lot of time on my corner of the internet, that means like a very specific slice of American female Instagram, you'll see all these girls be like, I have lucky girl syndrome. I'm so delusional. Great. Like, you have to be. Go look at Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, whose companies, like the revenue on them is like this, and his net worth is like this. Why? Because he's just completely delusional. Don't be completely delusional to the point of being criminal and crashing your robo-taxis, but like, there is something to be said for the sort of unhinged confidence of like a white American. So like take a little bit of that from our culture, especially when you're pitching to us, because like that's what we see all day. The pitches that I get are like, oh, this is gonna be a $10 trillion market. And then like and then the founders will have like nothing, but they pitch like they are genuinely the second coming of Jesus Christ. Yeah. And then founders who have like amazing pedigree and they're so smart and they'll be like, oh, I guess it's important that, I do have 10 PhDs in computer science and we all actually were founding team members at CERN. But that comes up at like the third conversation after they've already told you, but we don't want to be greedy and we're only going to raise $500,000 on a, 2 million valuation. And we know we're not ready for YC. And I'm like, you could run the world, right? You can certainly get into YC. So I think that, I don't remember the question, but I think that the point is like, take some of that like delusion, luck, like figure out how to have some of that to pair with like the actual skill sets that you have and the hard skills that you have and you have. And I think it just becomes much more interesting and competitive.
Yeah, I think it's, trying to summarize it is, perception is reality in a good way. Often in these things, and confidence as well. I was going to ask you about startups from Central Eastern Europe and Romania, what they have to put on the table to get funding, but you pretty much said it already.
Delusion, complete delusion.
So you pretty much said it already. So what should people do in this room to find $1 million during this summer?
Yes. Well, so the one other thing I'll say, right, you guys have the skill sets, and you know that because you have a lot of fancy degrees that say so. You have to have the sort of delusion and confidence and energy, the aura. Don't be a vibe coder, but do like have a vibe, right? And then I think the third piece of it, though, really is the idea. The biggest thing that I do think, besides just proximity to capital, that Silicon Valley often does have is they're pretty ruthless about pushing you to have a decent idea. Sometimes they can go too far in the other direction, like I was talking about, saying, okay, if one AI legal tech startup is good, then 500 would be great, is like not probably that accurate. However, looking at the market, and the thing I want to understand from any startup is how are you going to buy me a yacht, right? And I won't get too far into venture economics, but like that means that you need to build a multi-billion-dollar company. And so you can do that multiple ways. You can sell something for $1 to 10 billion people and have $10 billion of revenue and be valued at 1x revenue, like most e-commerce startups are, and be a $10 billion company. Or you can be valued at 10x revenue like most SaaS startups are in the public markets, and you can do 1 billion in revenue. And as long as that 1 billion in revenue is repeatable across, several different relatively stable customers, like that's also a $10 billion company, right? But I need to understand from the beginning how you're going to make me rich. And, by extension, my investors rich. And I know you're thinking, but Sarah, aren't you passionate about startups? Sure. But my job is to make money for people, and in doing that, I make money for myself, and nobody goes into a career where you have capitalist in the title because you want to be poor, right? So like, you got to make me money. So that is, I think, the other thing in this region that is sometimes missing is brilliant, interesting ideas that just don't have the ability to make enough money for venture scale. So that's the third thing I would say.
About finding money.
Finding money. Look around you, right? Like look around your region, your country, whatever. Literally Google richest people in X, right? And see who's there. And then also often, like I was talking about with my friend Kia, like Google richest people from X, right? Because you can find really interesting people to chase down or in interesting roles. Like one interesting thing about this region is that there is a sort of specific like naming convention, right? And so if you notice somebody at Texas Teachers, which is a huge investment organization that invests teacher pensions, who's like, they're definitely Romanian. That's definitely a Romanian last name. Like, great, ping them, right? They're probably more likely than not to answer your email than not. So think about that sort of immediate circle, like famous and rich, alumni of your university, whatever. But then, like, start to expand out and think about just who's willing to invest globally. I'll plug it again. I'll beat this dead horse, which is that for most startups, even before the very aggressive immigration crackdowns that we're seeing right now in the US, and I know what you're thinking, oh, I'm not like whatever, Guatemalan, I didn't like sneak across the border. The US is getting to be an almost impossible place to immigrate to, and you don't necessarily want to be there. However, you can very easily raise money from the US here. And by the way, it's so much more capital efficient to run a company here that all else being equal, if I know as an investor my dollar will go a lot further, it means you need less money, which means less dilution. Less dilution means more ownership. More ownership when your company exits means what? A yacht for me. And that's what we're really doing this for. So like keep that in mind, that there's something huge to be said for staying in this region. The way that you get to meet the US investors, the lowest hanging fruit in the world is accelerators. So, and not just regional ones. Regional are great and awesome. They're often hard to then get that next level of like outside capital. But if you can get a Y Combinator or a Techstars or something else to go to that program. They tend to be very flexible about visa stuff. If you get in and you can't go, they'll make it work remotely. Like they're not complete animals. Apply for it. I've been to every YC demo day for almost 10 years now. And the variability of the quality of the companies, I assure you that you can get in. Like, you can get in, right? They do their requests for startups. Read that. Think about that. Look at what's been in the last batches. Increasingly, a lot of that stuff is public, but you can get in. You have the pedigree. You can come up with the idea. It can't be we're building Uber Eats for Romania, because one, that probably already exists. Two, it's too small of a market cap. But like, build, Skype is the canonical example in this. Build something that you can build globally, right? Or Revolut we were talking about earlier. Something that you can either build truly globally from wherever you're at, or something that can work for huge swaths of like the entire EU because of regulation or whatever it is relatively easily. And then just find us. And I know that we're easily findable because I get thousands of pitches a year at my website, cleocap.com. Feel free to submit a pitch deck. I personally read every single one, and unsolicited through email. And like, I know that if you Google list of American pre-seed investors, there are loads of them out there. Now, what you shouldn't do is waste anybody's time in their inbox by being like, do you invest in Romanian startups? Like, I don't even answer my mom's text. I'm not going to like respond to that email, right? Just send me your pitch deck. Tell me what you're building. And so there's like doing that. If you really want to raise, if you really feel like the right path for me is to raise from a more global investor base, incorporate in Delaware. That's like the state that most American startups are incorporated in. You don't have to move to Delaware. It's a very small state. You wouldn't be happy there. But you incorporate there, and then you can get money basically globally because, as I like to say, I need to be able to sue my founders in the state of Delaware. I don't sue my founders. But, it's a legal thing for us that has nothing to do with your location. And then to specifically find us, honestly, stalk us. We are the chattiest people in the world. So almost all of us are on some form of social media. You've seen my smiling face on the Tech Slovenia promotional materials for months, right? So even if you didn't really want to come to the conference, if you're sitting in whatever, Estonia, you go onto your little Wizz Air and you're like, okay, I'll buy, a 40 euro ticket. I'll pop over and like, I'll waylay Sarah outside of the hotel to like pitch or something, or I'll send an email before and ask her if I can have 5 minutes at the conference. Like, you can be really strategic once it's a really boring process to raise money. You need to make a list of who to raise from, right? And then you need to stalk all their social media, LinkedIn. Some people still use X. Some people use a lot of Instagram. See where they're going to be, see where they're speaking, even what they're interested in. If they're obsessed with tennis, they're probably going to go to Wimbledon. Should you buy a box at Wimbledon? Absolutely not. Should you buy the little cheap Wizz Air ticket? I'm like really into Wizz Air right now. The Wizz Air ticket, right? The 40 euros to get down to London and have a 20-minute coffee with that VC while they're in town so they can write it off as a vacation or as a work day while they're on vacation? Absolutely yes. And so we self-promote exactly where we are. We're not hard to access. We're not hard to find. Americans have terrible taste in vacations, so we love going to southern Italy in like August when it's literally way too hot to be alive. So if you know that, and there's VCs that you've interacted with a little bit, ping them and say, hey, are you coming to Europe this summer? Like, would love to chat, let me know, we can grab coffee. And you're like, Europe's not a monolith, I'm not anywhere near Italy. That's fine. They'll say, yeah, I'm gonna be in Sicily. And you say, okay, and then you buy your Wizz Air ticket, go to Sicily and get that 20-minute coffee. Like, these are low-hanging fruit things. Web Summit's a great conference. This is a great conference for having VCs show up, and just be ready to pitch them with your like super concise elevator pitch, X for Y. This is why it's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. This is how much I want to raise. In general, you want to raise, if it's a pre-seed round, call it $500,000 to $1 million, sell 10% or more of the company. Like, just be really concise with us, and then hand us a business card. Follow up on LinkedIn, follow up with us, and you will get into real conversations without having to spend $1 million on a studio apartment in San Francisco. We're out of time.
Thank you, Sarah. That was invaluable information. And where that is coming from, there's more of that. I think in the Q&A, you will be in the Q&A booth.
I'm going to be in the Q&A right now.
So please approach her and don't be afraid.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right.